Okay, everybody, thank you for joining us today for the Panoramic Cybersecurity Panel Debate webinar. I'm joined by our partners and the host is Martin Bryant today, and Martin will be introducing our speakers. Thank you very much.
Hello and welcome to this panoramic cybersecurity debate. My name is Martin SFP Bryant and thanks for joining us today. It feels like these days there's a new significant breach or threat announced practically every day. Just in the past few days, we've seen serious incidents at the likes of Uber and Rockstar Games, among others, with significant impacts on their business operations. So it's a good time to take a look at your cybersecurity setup. Well, it's always a good time to look at your cybersecurity setup. And identify where you need to tighten things up and make changes you need to and secure your business. So this event will really help with that. You won't get any sales pitches here. We're not about that. This is all about a unique chance to hear from global security experts sharing their thoughts, experience, knowledge and stories. We've got a top quality panel for you who will be sharing their thoughts on the major threats to cybersecurity today, the weakest point in a cybersecurity plan, the key elements for a cybersecurity strategic plan, and lots more as well, I'm sure we'll dig into. So do stick with us to the end as well, because although I said there are no sales pitches, you will get the chance to claim some really useful free things to help you with your cybersecurity right at the end of the session. But now I'd like to introduce the panel. We've got 5 experts from some of the biggest names in cybersecurity: Bitdefender, Sonicwall, Cisco, Mimecast, and CyberQ. So first of all, let's go to Dan Pittman, who is Director of Product and Technical Marketing at Bitdefender. Hello, Dan.
Hi, Martin. How you doing?
Hi. Tell us a bit about yourself.
So Dan Pittman, technical product person, I guess you could say, at Bitdefender. So I look after making sure that all our customers are listened to, and that the way we talk about our products and the way we talk about our services is accurate and correct for them. Bitdefender is a cybersecurity company, obviously, so we provide a range of technologies and services to customers to look after their systems, detect, prevent, respond, etc., all that good stuff, to keep them safe. We take those to market in a number of different ways, but ultimately we try to make sure that customers have choice based on their risk profile and obviously their budget as well, which is an important factor.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. So next up, we've got Matt Logan, Senior Manager for Northern Europe at Sonicwall. Hello, Matt.
Hi, Martin. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for taking time to join us today. I've got 21 years in the cybersecurity field, having worked 10 years in post-sales, 11 years in pre-sales, working for quite a few large vendors over the years, Symantec, McAfee, Deep Instinct, Digital Guardian, and Senson, and now at Sonicwall. My role at Sonicwall is to head up the pre-sales element. My team is spread across the UK, France, Nordics, and Middle East, Turkey, and Africa. Sonicwall, we've been around for some time. We're known as the firewall company, but we do so much more than firewalls, and that's one of the remits for me coming on board, is to help drive this better understanding of what we do and how we do it, and moving away from that 30-year stamp of a firewall company. There's so much more to cybersecurity. And happy to talk to you today about how I perceive the answers to the questions set. So nice to meet you all. I'm looking forward to speaking with you.
Great. And next, Eric Roozendaa, who is Security Solutions Engineer for EMEA at Cisco. Eric, good morning.
Good morning, Martin, and good morning, everybody on the call. Nice to have you here with us. My name is Eric Roozendaa. I'm a security solutions engineer here by Cisco. Look after the cloud security business in almost the entire EMEA region. So I'm mainly helping the small business startups and stuff with their cybersecurity challenges. I'm also here to talk to you a little bit more on how we perceive the threats today. It's a topic very close to my heart. As I'm speaking to a lot of companies that are embarking on the journey, whether this is new or the customers already longer on, essentially everybody is on that journey. And all the vendors are there out to help you to make sure that that journey will go smooth.
Great. And next, Francis Gaffney, Senior Director for Threat Intelligence Engineering at Mimecast. Hello, Francis.
Hello to you and hello to the panel, and thank you very much for allowing us on the call today. So I'm Francis. I lead the Threat Intelligence Engineering team, as you heard, at Mimecast. That involves me leading the labs and future tooling. So we look at, say, threats that we see out there in the wild at the moment and how we would actually anticipate what they're going to look like in the future, so we have the necessary mitigations in place. I lead the threat intelligence team and the strategic requirement. I lead the data scientists team. I lead the chief scientist's span of control, and then the TI risk. I started in this industry about 20 years ago in something called psychological operations. So I wasn't IT to start off with. I worked for government. I then moved across to counter-terrorism exercising and stuff like that in terms of academia. And then finally moved across to cyber, because the government's idea was that those who had dealt with counter-terrorism in the way it had would apply the same methodologies into how we would anticipate what threat actors do, who they are, and so on and so forth. So my job really is to, like Matt said earlier, is to really share the awareness of what we see, how threat actors do things in terms of their methodologies, how they do their targeting. So again, I look at counter deception and counter dissemination, for harmful messaging and so on and so forth, and then that allows the threat actor to explore. Key part though really is to help people identify their risk, because people don't necessarily understand how useful the intelligence is, so therefore we start trying to articulate that in terms of risk. So what is the impact on the business? And again, as a couple of people have said already, is that when we do this risk, it's based on their risk appetite, based on their budget. They're able to, obviously, mitigate these risks. Because again, the four treatments, and tolerate, terminate, and transfer risk. It may be better to do different types of that sort of treatment. But yeah, that's what I do.
Great, and I can't skip this. You mentioned at the start that you used to work in psychological operations, which sounds very kind of kind of Hollywood movie stuff.
So we now call it information operations because psychological operations upsets people. But yeah, my job was to interrupt people's thought processes to get them to do things I want them to do. And if you think about it, that's in marketing, advertising, and threat actors. They're trying to get you to engage, click on links. So it's a natural progression. I was a chemistry teacher for 10 years before that. So actually, for me, it was a career progression, moving from messing with children in terms of chemistry and getting them to understand that sort of thing, to move into psychological operations. It was an easy baby step.
Excellent. And we also have Vishvas Nayi, head of cyber operations at CyberQ. Vishvas, hello.
Hey, Martin. Thank you for having me, and good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us. So yeah, I think kind of a lineup to follow in terms of experience. So yeah, I started life off in digital forensics, working for various law enforcement, both locally and nationally across the UK. Did that for a few years, had a great time, and then kind of joined CyberQ Group, where I've worn various hats over the years, but at the moment I head up the cyber operations. What does that mean? I work with our various teams across, offensive security and the defensive security, and helping customers kind of really understand, where they are and what they need to do to improve their cyber resilience. And, taking a really good focus, not only just on the technology, but also people and process. Personally, I and the business really believe, you need to have the right balance between the three to, have a really good kind of cyber plan in place. CyberQ Group, we've been around since 2016, based in Birmingham, same office block as Brand, I believe. And yeah, we're based across UK, Europe, APAC, and the US. So yeah, that's me.
Excellent. Okay. Thanks a lot for all of you for joining us. We're going to get stuck into the first topic of the day now. Just to say, if you've got any questions for any of the speakers, do feel free. There should be a Q&A tab in the interface you're watching this through. Just go there and share your questions. Please direct them to a specific speaker, because if you have a general question and then we put it to everyone, it takes ages. So if somebody said something interesting and you want to pick them up on that and you want to ask them for a bit more detail or challenge them on it or whatever, then just do that and say who your question is directed at. And at the end of the session, we'll be picking up on all of those, or as many as we can at least. So yeah, we're going to dive into the first topic now, which is what are the 3 major threats to cybersecurity today? Now, each of the guests we've got today were told they had 3 minutes to cover this each. We actually have a little bit of leeway on that, a little bit. So don't worry about garbling your words. If you've got a lot to say, be relaxed, and we'll give you each enough time to talk. So yeah, the first person we're going to go to then, let's go back to Dan at Bitdefender. So Dan, what would you say are the 3 major threats to cybersecurity today?
Hard, isn't it, to put it into 3, I think. So hopefully there's enough to go around, and I think everyone's got a different point of view. I'm going to start with an obvious one, though, and hopefully I can give some kind of insights from our labs and our research division. So I'll start with ransomware, right? It's an obvious one for everybody. Those of you who don't know, Bitdefender has a business side and a consumer side, and we see it on both, right, of course. What we especially see in our labs and research is obviously it's on the rise, so everyone's getting a bit of ransomware on their systems, and whether that's through whatever methods that's through. But the interesting thing I think we see is the evolution of ransomware away from this like commoditized thing that is just a piece of software we perceive it as, that gets dropped onto somebody's systems and into a business, and a business-like model that we see the adversary behaving in. The trend has been going on for a little while, but has accelerated lately, we would say, and we've seen into a somewhat franchise model. And it's kind of, don't use that term lightly, because there is a franchise. You have people that are out effectively in the market, embedded in customer systems. They have access, they've got a way in somehow, and they're effectively, reselling that access to a central group or central person that has the tools. So it's literally like McDonald's, where McDonald's will send out the tools, maybe a broken ice cream machine, obviously, along with some other stuff to make the food, to the franchisees. The franchisees go and use the tools to make some money, give most of that money back to the person in the center, but they take a cut for themselves, of course. And so this is kind of, in a way, it's a business model, and that's a general trend, I would say, in the adversary world, of more business-like models within, their industry, right? So dangerous, of course, because there's a scale, an economy of scale that they can achieve from that. The other thing I would say is more about the businesses that are on the defense side, right? The blue side, I guess you could say. So one is coverage. It's definitely a risk, a threat to people's cybersecurity from not having enough coverage. And we're seeing that trend in the market through things like XDR. So I'm not a fan of acronyms. I'm not a fan of all the TLAs that we have in security. But the good thing about XDR is that it's providing coverage. The security industry has realized, endpoint's not enough, network's not enough, log isn't enough, one thing isn't enough, right? We now need more coverage. And XDR is a good thing that's bringing it together. There's a risk in the industry that XDR becomes some technology platform seam-saw replacement, which hopefully it won't become, because we know what happened to SIEM, or we know how SIEM is perceived in the market and these days. But the outcomes from XDR can be really good, because you get more coverage, more detection, more correlation across all those sources. It's a fantastic thing. But the risk is that people don't have enough coverage. They don't have visibility, right? And the last one is just a picnic problem, right? The big threat to cybersecurity, there's a picnic problem in chair, not in computer. So the problem is in the chair most of the time. And that's what we see time and time again. And coverage, of course, helps with that, getting coverage across the different platforms. But those are the kind of 3 things from my point of view that risk impacting our customers and risk impacting businesses.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Matt, from Sonicwall, what would you say are your 3 major threats for cybersecurity today?
Yeah, thanks, Martin, and please, there's going to be a bit of repetition here, Dan. I'm not stealing your your taglines, but certainly, I think the first one, from my experience, is attacks and adversaries, and how we're seeing a major shift in the paradigm of the way attacks are happening. And to further Dan's comment, previously it was indiscriminate wide burst attacks, drive-by downloads, waterhole attacks, vulnerability exploitation, which is still a thing today. But ever since we, endured the global pandemic, and that's obviously a mark point in everyone's lives for many reasons, but equally for the shift in attacks becoming more targeted, focused on specific companies and individuals. And adversaries are still using the tried and tested methods such as social engineering and identifying weak points in. But the identifying weak points has sort of shifted as well, because we're seeing a lot more people working from home, working on their own devices. There was a global shortage of silicon, semiconductors, so people having to use their own equipment. And as we know, we've got our own equipment, and people don't necessarily keep them sterile or for pure business purposes. So that shift in attack is more targeted, and again, to further Dan, criminal organizations are offering ransomware as a service or crime as a service as a business model now. So you can hire bad guys to perform attacks, target attacks in any mean, manner or form that you choose. And these attacks are evolving and changing by the minute. And we release a biannual cyber threat report. And in the first half of 2022, we saw a massive triple-digit increase in encrypted threats. So malware over HTTPS, which is another shift of the and a tell of the attackers becoming more sophisticated in their approach. So that's the first one. The second one is a multi-vendor security stack. So over the past 20 years, companies have tried to, organizations, businesses have purchased point products, which has been great to focus on specific holes in their security strategy. Now, as we all know, with multi-vendor security products, you end up with this pain of management of trying to maintain all these different systems, which leads on to the third point I'll cover in a second, skill gap, and I'll go into that in a bit more detail. But what we're seeing is a lot of companies ending up with a lot of shelfware, cost increasing because your discounting models are less likely, and also organizations post-pandemic are trying to reduce costs as well, because everything is going up, cost of living, electricity, energy. So we're seeing this big shift in the way budgets are used, budget constraints, and how organizations are allocating. And Cyber Observer have carried out some research, and they're saying small businesses have between 15 and 20 security tools, medium 50 to 60 security tools, and enterprises over 130 different security tools. So security product stack is one. The third and final one is the skill gap, which I touched on briefly a minute ago. So, globally, there's an estimated 3.5 million open security vacancies. And if you have multiple technology stacks, you're a small organization trying to find or skill up individuals to manage those security stacks is quite difficult. There's a government report out as well saying, almost 700,000 businesses, 50%, have basic skill gaps in their employee base. Basic skill sets being able to, perform basic actions within the organization. So looking at your risk posture, managing software. There's also a 33% in advanced skill gaps, pen testing, forensics analysis, and security architecting. So what this means is, businesses are struggling. They don't have the staff, the people, the skills to manage all these different technologies. So I see those as my three major threats today.
Okay, thanks, Matt. I'll pick up on some of these points at the end when we do a little bit of a summary, because I think some interesting things coming through here. Eric from Cisco, what are your three major threats for cybersecurity today?
Yeah, so I've been obviously looking a little bit on the guidance from Cisco Talos, which is our cyber threat intelligence agency. And I think what things really stood out for me as I was reading through some of the blogs and reports and stuff, is I think malware is still something that we see really, really common. I think Dan also tipped it on earlier. But another thing that we see was still a lot of man in the middle attacks as well, and also password attacks as well. People chewing too long on the passwords with the chance that they're being stolen, that people can misuse at a later time without any other form of backup to get access to the systems. And it was actually astonishing, especially that password attacks thingy, because you would think nowadays lots of companies would use or have systems in place, right, to eliminate that type of things, where you, for instance, need to change your password every 3 months or and that kind of thing. So a lot of companies don't do that. It's really astonishing to see that. And to be honest with you, that's the business side of it. Let's look at our own private lives. How often do we change our emails from, let's say, our personal private emails? How often do we change passwords? Let's all be very honest here in the room and on the bridge, right? I mean, that puts you sometimes to mind how easy things can go wrong by just little error, like these little things.
Okay. Is that your 3?
Yeah, they were my 3.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Excellent.
Right?
Yeah. Excellent. Around the password thing, guidance changes around frequency of password changes, isn't it? It used to be you had to change your password every 30 days and things, and the guidance and the opinion around that has changed over time, hasn't it? So it's an interesting one. Francis from Mimecast, tell us your 3 major threats for cybersecurity today.
So I feel sorry for Vish because he's going to have to try and find different ones. But I actually do support what everyone's said so far, because this is what we see as an industry. So ransomware is still evolving. People are still paying, so therefore it's still a business model. As both Dan and Matt had said, that the pandemic was a very, very turning point, because people were then using their own devices. Therefore, that social engineering, what we call pattern of analysis, where I would actually start getting inside your life, working out where you're vulnerable, and those sort of things were then being exposed. So I do support and agree. The last one I agree with the stack. We have people, so many different vendors and things, technologies they use, that it actually does complicate sometimes the picture, because you get that. But my 3 I'm going to add to the list, because these are things that are part of my research at university that I lecture at, is quantum vulnerabilities, because we always say it's 5 to 10 years away, and one day we will be right. But actually, we are now starting to identify, those who do track what the US is doing in terms of the crypto, that post-crypto world. And we actually are now seeing, and we actually are seeing in some of our very advanced and early adopters of quantum, these vulnerabilities now starting to appear. We're also seeing threat actors, and that's my second point, but we're also now starting to see threat actors harvesting encrypted data, because they know in the next 18 months to 5 years, they'll be able to decrypt it. And legacy data is still just as important as current data, because I can use that person could have moved on to a different company, but now I know their vulnerability. So there's different things like that. So what we're advising customers to start doing is a vulnerability study, an audit. It takes up to 18 months to do some of these audits, of identify in your system where the crypto is, where this sort of stuff is, and where you may need to prioritize where you're going to put in that post-quantum cryptography in the future. So we're trying to say to people now, just start it in the background. We're very, very busy people, but we can start doing that vulnerability study. When we start getting closer and closer to that, that Q day, then at least we will be sort of slightly ahead of the curve, because trying to do it after, it's going to be far, far, far too late. The second point then is the threat actors. We've also seen an evolution in terms of not just the crime as a service, but we're actually now starting to see nation state more, not in terms of particular countries, but nation state sponsored, condoning proxies. So we're starting to see sheltering, where nation state has allowed activities to take place. Now, this isn't because the nation state is a baddie. It could be that the nation state doesn't have the necessary skill set in their governance to be able to go after the baddies in their jurisdictions. So I'm not just saying the traditional actors that we all know, it's actually other ones where people are in these jurisdictions, but that there isn't the legislation or the necessary skill set for people to be able to, as in stop the threat activity going on in their jurisdiction. So we are seeing more and more advanced techniques being used. We call it the sub-threshold space. That space between war and peace. There's that grey area, and we're starting to see more and more activity, because how do I respond? If you stop my critical national infrastructure, do I respond in the physical world with a missile? So there's this new way of politics that we're trying to work out where we fit and how does cybersecurity, because we've got multinational companies. You think, well, maybe you don't have a big enterprise company, or you're not a big enterprise company. I'm not going to attack the big enterprise company, because usually they're protected at the yin yang. What I'm going to do is go down threat and then wiggle my way up to there, through whether it be an invoice, whether it be me getting into your home network because you haven't updated your firmware on your TV screen. There's so many ways I would attack people, and I do a lovely talk on how I can get inside your life. It makes people not want to talk to me in pubs and things, but it is, how I can get into someone's life in about 2 to 4 days. It depends on your activity online. And then my last one, and it is a real one, and I'm hoping people do agree, is our people are the most important thing. If people didn't click on links, I wouldn't have a job. But it is trying to get that awareness training, tell people what the threats are out there. And as Matt said earlier, we're at home, we're using our own devices, and I could turn around to Dan and say, have you seen this email? And Dan would say, yeah, I've seen it. In the office, you don't want to make up a Zoom call just to say to Dan, have you seen this email? So people are nervous. And if me as a threat actor has been very, very good, I've written that, scripted that email. So it's not so much that the people are incompetent or naive. It's actually they're victims of a well-rehearsed crime. I mean, I used to work as a police officer years and years ago before I went into teaching, and again, you'd have these, fraud by artifice offences where someone would knock on the front door, distract the homeowner while someone came in the back. They've just moved this sort of crime into the virtual space. So people are not naive, incompetent, unqualified. They're just a victim of a well-targeted thing. So the more we can tell people about these things, and this panel, absolutely amazing experts here, the more they can share their concerns, what they've seen, their experiences, that actually helps people become that what we call the cyber hygiene, to bring the whole standard up of the industry. And we'll get better and better the more we share these sort of things with people.
It's just knowing to have that in mind, partly, isn't it? And remembering, this, like you say, this hygiene at all times, just like you'd always wash your hands after going to the toilet, for example. It's that, just having that kind of sense of I've got to keep my security at an appropriate level. Vishvas from CyberQ. There's been this concern about repetition. Don't worry too much. Even if all of your points have been already made, I'm sure you've got different things to say. So no worries about that. What would you? And maybe we'll go the other way around next time, and we'll mix it up a bit so you can. So there's less concern about that. But what are your 3 major threats to cybersecurity?
Thanks. No, most of it covered. However, I will build upon them. So, firstly, to some of what's already been said about ransomware. Major threat. Different numbers where you see it, but I'm pretty sure I saw something very recently that an organization falls victim to a ransomware attack every 11 seconds, right? And that's a huge amount, and most of these people may not have a plan to deal with these things, and unfortunately either end up paying or spend a lot of money with law enforcement or private security firms to kind of resolve them. But what we've seen in the industry is how these ransomware attackers are getting the payment out, right? So instead of saying, Martin, I'm going to use you as an example. Martin, I've compromised you, pay me X amount of Bitcoins. Martin doesn't want to pay, right? So what they're trying to do is, because they've understood the environment now, they are going in and looking at their suppliers and customers and emailing, hey, I've compromised Martin. I've got his data and I've got your data. Tell him to pay me, or I'm going to release this, right? And I saw it for the first time about 3 years ago, and I was I was a bit taken back, because it was a really clever way to get the company to pay. And I've seen it more and more, and that going into supply chain. It's probably not very often spoken about, but understanding that these criminals are getting smarter, as some of the other panelists have said. If they can't get it from you, they've got your personal life, but they've also got your supply chain to kind of put some pressure on you. right? Then moving on, and I'll change the topic. I think focusing on IoT, right? Not so much OT, but IoT, right? I think a lot of businesses are doing a great job, and with the various technologies around, getting an understanding of their network and get endpoints certainly. But a lot of times, and these are usually executives who come in and want to plug in a kettle or something. I call them JFDIs, just freaking get it done. That's what goes to the, IT person, and they want to plug in their iKettle to boil their tea at whatever temperature, not knowing that, it's being connected to, a LAN network that gives access to, we did an engagement recently, hack the kettle, default passwords, get onto the boardroom, record a boardroom meeting, find out, who's getting sacked and who's play that back. And it's like, how did you get in? And the simple response is your kettle was, I'm not going to use the word, but yeah, so, and this is what I mean. It's the landscape has changed so much, over the years that, back, before, where we were just hacking servers and websites, it's moved, it's evolved, we're hacking people, and people are the weakest link, but starting to think about operational technology, shutting down factories, shutting down systems at hospital. It can have major impacts, not just financially, but sometimes lives. Yeah, and then the last major threat I see, and this is just the lack of cyber hygiene. And I know it's been covered before, but NCSC in the UK have done an amazing job over the last couple of years. Just their top 10 things. I truly believe if businesses really implemented these top 10 things, they would negate a significant amount of threat to them, just by doing the basics. But sometimes resources, finances, it gets in the way. We get it, but I would highly recommend whoever's attending this calls to kind of look up the top 10 recommendations from NCSC and try and implement them. It will give them real resilience against cyber attacks.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Just to pick up on a couple of things that seem to come through and particularly struck me. Well, first of all, this increasing professionalization we've seen of, especially around ransomware. We've heard stories of companies that compromise people's systems, block their systems, and say, you obviously, like typical ransomware, you can't have it back until you pay us. But then they've got discounting strategies, they've got pricing models, they've got all the things that a tech startup would have for selling into business, but they're selling via crime, and it's really interesting to see those kinds of approaches being used in such a slick way, and also the other point around nation states being sometimes involved in these kind of things. Just throwing this out to anyone who wants to chip in, in terms of the balance between traditional criminals and nation state involvement, are we seeing an increase in nation state involvement? How much of it is nation state? How much of it is your typical kind of online gangsters? Anyone want to chip in on that?
I think it depends on the level. I really think it depends on the level. If you look at big, large global enterprises, I think it is sometimes state related. I think if you're looking at the smaller businesses, that are sometimes not as secure, but it is mainly, and what we've seen, doesn't count for everything, right? I mean, Uber is a fantastic example for people that just had enough time on their hands to get in. Right, is a very clear example, but often we see like just people that try to steal information, competitive info, and the easier to attack through the size and also IT size, right? I mean, obviously, look at the bigger enterprises, they got like a full-time IT and even cybersecurity staff that is looking for threats in the company, all then with backup from the vendors where they buy services from, perhaps channel partner. But yeah, I think there is a big difference there.
Yeah. Okay. And let's not forget that Twitter might have there's been allegations of spies working in for various companies working actually in the organization, but it was a teenager who did the big hack that compromised the CEO's Twitter account and started tweeting all kinds of things. So yeah, threats can come from all sides. So let's move on to our second topic.
Martin, I was just going to say, especially to back up Eric, I think also with the nation states, whether it be condoned, proxies, sponsored, whatever, when we talk about nation states, it covers a huge area. It's also, I think, the spotlight on cyber since the pandemic, because we actually have had a massive increase in awareness of cyber activity since the pandemic, just to obviously help people working from home or in hybrid working. And I think that's why we know that there's more nation state activity, not because anything that that we've suddenly seen an increase in it. It's always been going on. I mean, that's what taxpayers' money pay for. I'm expecting GCHQ and NCSC to do their job. I'm hoping they're doing it. So these sort of things, but I think it's just that awareness as people become a bit more cybersecurity savvy. You have programs on the television, so everyone, it's what we expect. And I say I'd be very, very disappointed if we weren't doing it, as it were, but we do it for good in
Yeah.
So therefore, I think it's just awareness. I don't think we're seeing an increase in the activity, but we're just more aware that there are these other actors as well. So I agree with Eric that they wouldn't necessarily go for the small fry, but again, if that's my way into getting into the big company, you'll use it.
Yeah. Okay, right. Well, let's move on to our second topic, which is what is typically the weakest point in a cyber defense plan. And again, we'll go to you each in turn, 3 minutes each to tell us your thoughts on this. So yeah, let's take it the opposite direction then. Vishvas, first of all, tell us your thoughts on this.
Thanks. So usually the ones that are covered, usually humans. Again, I just want to take a different point. I'd really say more and more often it gets overlooked. Not the weakest, but it often gets overlooked. It's the supply chain. When organizations are making plans on their cyber defense, right? They are really concerned about themselves. If they're global, if they're small, what technology do I need? What qualified people do I need? What processes do I need? However, the amount of incident responses I've been being called into, where it's actually been a supplier, a trusted supplier, who was compromised, and then the attacker kind of got access to the clients we've gone into, has been increasing, right? And it plays on the same level as phishing and social engineering. The notion of trust, right? You trust your employees, but you also trust your key suppliers. And I'm not here to say you shouldn't, but the amount of how often do you ask the question, who are my key suppliers? What would happen if they were compromised? Am I able to deliver my services? We live in a global economy now, and oftentimes if your critical if your IT supplier goes down, it might be hard for you to do day-to-day business, if you're web developer. So, I would really kind of say, that is something that needs to be talked about more at a senior management level, board level, because, attacks can come from anywhere, as we've discussed previously. And, we've seen an increase in attacks coming through the kind of, supply chain.
Okay, excellent. Francis, from Mimecast.
So actually, it's very linked to what Vish has just said there, because my concern usually is that the cyber defense plan should actually be part of the overall business continuity planning for an organization. It shouldn't be siloed, so you're not allowed to use silo anymore. Cylinders of excellence, but it's siloed separately and actually treated separately. It should be part of that overall plan. And that structuring of the traditional security strategies, I don't think are going to be sufficient to maintain the necessary capabilities, adaptive capabilities. That's what I'm thinking, that adaptive capabilities that organizations with big risk profiles, be able to stay ahead of the increases in complexity and in connected world, the IoTs, the IIoTs, those sort of things. And I think if we don't look at it in that holistic view, linking in, because obviously cyber in a company, there's very few places where there isn't IT nowadays, even just touching a pass to get into the building, anything. There's lots and lots of different ways we have IT. And I think when I look at companies' plans, and I used to do government strategies personally, and it's not it just doesn't get down to the granularity it needs to, so that when something happens, you bring out the SOPs and you start flicking through and think, oh man, it tells me to do X. And you think, well, no, but what does X include? Lots of other things, and we don't have that granularity. So I think making sure that cyber defense is part of the overall business continuity planning is really, really important, because it just gets into so many places.
Great. Okay. Eric from Cisco. What would you say are typically the weakest points in a cybersecurity defense plan?
Yeah, so I think weakest point is it's the overlooking. Nowadays we see a big shift, people moving from on-prem to the cloud. But did I covered everything with that? Is there not somewhere maybe in the server in the room or under the desk, a big old computer with a big pile of dust on it, somewhere connected to the internet and running on old software? Are we aware what systems we have running in our premise? I think that's one. Secondly, often what's overlooking is my risk enoughly spread? Am I dumping all my backup on one thing with the blessings that it will all go well? Or is it sufficiently spread between the vendors that if one goes down, someone else hopefully can jump in to ensure that nothing goes wrong? And another thing is often overlooked is, are you properly, I would say, educating, or not, maybe not educating, but also do you get the end users of well enough involved? Because they're often the weakest link, as we all have discussed about here in this panel debate. And are they enoughly involved to be constantly aware that they are also part of the resilience plan? And I think that's the main points I wanted to bring in.
Yeah.
Well.
Okay. We'll come back to some of these points shortly. Matt from Sonicwall, what would you say are the three major threats to? Oh, sorry, that was our previous question. What is typically the weakest point in a cyber defense plan?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I had a good think about this overnight, and I think historically it's execution on plan. So everybody has these grand ideas, and they say, right, we're going to go and get VPNs, or we're going to approach a zero trust network, or we're going to migrate to the cloud, and not having a good plan in place, and then the execution thereof on that plan has quite an impact on the organization, and it leads back to the other points that all the other guys on the call here have mentioned, and we mentioned as well around reduced budgets, cybersecurity skill gaps, disparate technologies, a whole range of different vendor technologies, and if they're not, the outcomes, if you're not executing on that plan succinctly in the time allocated, then your costs are going to spiral because you're running over. If you don't plan well enough ahead and have the right skills, people, process, internal, external, whoever it may be, your costs are going to spiral. Your cybersecurity plans are just going to go on and on and on. And by the time they've gone on for so long, the adversaries, as we've heard, have changed. The threats have changed. The attacks have changed. We still will have, ransomware as a service and all other crime as a service. But the real key part is have a good plan, and we'll talk about this in the next question, but have a good plan and execute on that plan and make it happen and stick to it. And I think that's my understanding of where a defense plan, that's the weakest point.
Yeah, so the weakest point is simply not having a plan.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, and Dan from Bitdefender.
So Eric gave me flashbacks. I remember I agree with that. The coverage, making sure you know where everything is going to be a key part of the plan. I remember taking over a data center 10 years ago or something, and during the tour around all the racks, I noticed this little HP desktop sat in the corner, just plugged into a rack. I'm like, what is that? Oh, it's our FTP server. Oh, well, our customers upload their customers' details onto it for badge printing. I was like, going to unplug that then tomorrow, shall we? Of course, you couldn't, because it was business critical, and that's always the challenge, right? The business. So not to attack your question, but I think the weakest point in a cyber defense plan is strategic, and it's the word defense for me. So this relates kind of to what Francis was saying about continuity. So we're very focused in security and to the point of inflexibility sometimes on stopping the attack, to the point of not really thinking about what we're going to do from a business perspective after the attack. How do we recover? And this is kind of where the cyber resilience trend and cyber resilience phrase comes in as a superset of cybersecurity. It's not a replacement for cybersecurity. It's a superset of cybersecurity that includes all sorts of other things, right? And really the idea is it focuses the business and the planning on the end-to-end chain and including business continuity. Now, as I touched on, I spent a lot of time in IT operations, and the horrific meetings I'm in where, if we tested our DR plan, if we tested BCP, are we sure of it? Oh, it's fine. It's the same problem in security where we don't really know what we're going to do after the attack, not in detail, not to the runbook level, not to the process level, and it's certainly not integrated with the business, integrating that business. So I think it's happening. That trend that we saw in IT, where IT became much closer and integrated into the business, security has to become much more integrated into the business to make the cyber resilience plan complete across the business and across security. So, make sure that you are resilient. And my analogy for that is there's two, right, which are kind of work. So a boxer doesn't go into the ring just focus on dodging and weaving, right? They're going to take a punch, and they know they're going to take a punch, and they're ready to take that punch. But I kind of prefer my other analogy, which is about how people build houses around the world, because it has to be appropriate for your business, right? So in earthquake prone areas, they build these really resilient buildings that can shake, and they really cost lots of money because you can survive an earthquake, right? And you can build your way out of that. But in places where, you think of in America, where they have lots of tornadoes, they just build them out of matchsticks and balsa wood, right? Because it's really hard to survive a tornado, so they get it knocked down. You build really quickly, and we can take that approach in IT and operations and orchestration. That do we need to rebuild our infrastructure very quickly and have very mobile and fluid data sets, or do we need to build a super secure, more in obviously in government and highly regulated industries, secure infrastructure, and really defend ourselves to the hilt and make sure that we have a really strong DR plan. So having that appropriate plan for your business and your business model is normally the weakest point, I guess, is my summary.
Yeah, so one common thing that's come through here is simply not having a plan, or not a good enough plan is the biggest weak point of all, which makes perfect sense, slightly concerning. But when you hear all these stories about companies that have suffered a breach, suffered a serious cyber attack, often what does come through, if it's reported out by journalists, maybe you're involved on the cybersecurity side, you start to hear these stories of their security was shocking. They hadn't even thought about this stuff. So yeah, very interesting to hear. Vishvas, you've mentioned a couple of times the supply chain. Could you maybe kind of give us an example of that? You've mentioned the threat there of not just what's happening in your own business. Could you give us an example of that, just for people who maybe aren't so au fait with that?
Yeah, certainly. So, combining the supply chain with social engineering, right? I was working in Africa once, and it was a really large invoice payout, but no one falls for my cousin's stuck in space anymore, and getting but if you have a trusted supplier or a trusted partner that sends you an email at the end of the month from their domain, which is legitimate, goes through your protections and stuff, and just says, listen, there's this invoice which needs to pay, legitimate, but we've just updated our bank details, right? For all intents and purposes, you've got your checks, you checked your domains and everything, but the process fallout there is there's no call that went from the finance person to the other organization to say, hey, I've just received an email that says, oh, our bank details have updated. Is this true? There was no second step verification. They trusted that it came from a partner. It looked legitimate. They went as far as to send a second email pretending to be an executive from the organization to say, hey, we have changed our bank details. They were very clever about it. And this organization ended up paying a nice invoice of, I think, about £5 million converted. But again, these criminals are getting smarter, and they're leveraging suppliers, trust, social engineering, right, to open up those gaps.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I interviewed a security head of security for SolarWinds, who a few months ago, who obviously they had a very high profile supply chain attack recently, or not that recently now, but that really made waves around the world, and interesting stuff. Okay, so now we're going to move on to our next topic. Just a reminder for everyone watching, if you've got any questions, anything you want to pull people up on, you want to ask more questions about something, you'd like to dig in a bit more detail over something someone brushed over and you thought that was really interesting, I'd like to know more, use the Q&A tab. Just tap that and type in your question along with who it's for, and we'll be picking up on those in a little while. But yes, now we're going to move on to from if you are one of those companies that maybe doesn't have the security plan like we just mentioned, or it's not as thorough as it maybe should be, let's find out what the 5 key elements are of a successful cyber security strategic plan. Dan, so let's start with you then from Bitdefender. So each of you have 5 minutes on this, so a bit more time to go into detail, so feel free to wax lyrical about your thoughts on this. So 5 key elements of a successful cybersecurity strategic plan. Dan.
Well, thank you. There's going to be lots of repetition here, but hopefully we can all cover different parts of the kind of some of bits and pieces of how to go about this. So first, and I alluded to this in the last one, is start with the business, right? We're not protecting chips, right? Yes, the end goal is to protect the infrastructure, the IT, but the end goal is to protect the business from the harm of a cyber attack, the impact of a cyber attack, or stop it, right? End goal, fine, but the impact of it is the goal to have. So start with the business. What are the business goals? What's critical to the business? Or organization, obviously if it's public sector or something else, and make sure you understand those first. My background is in architecture generally, and so I always want to start with my North Star, my end state. What is the goal I've got, and also start with a set of principles that I can adhere to, that I can also reference throughout the plan. So a key thing when you're building any plan is to get down to those core principles of what you want to achieve, and how you're going to go about to achieving it. So have a principle about how you approach decision making, obviously based on the business requirements that I said, but the other ways are how we approach security. So I use 2 phrases in cybersecurity to kind of summarize this, but of course you can do it in any way you want, and they're 2 really common ones. One's very obvious: you can't secure what you can't see. We've all touched on coverage, visibility, your ability to understand what you've got, where it is, what data is on it. But that's not just about, like I say, what you've got. It's about what it's for, how important it is to the business, how business critical it is, and how it behaves as well, of course. I'll give you an example. Not every answer in cybersecurity is turn it off, unplug it. That's very common when you talk to the business. Although no matter how much we want it to be, right, disconnect it. I remember wanting to walk out of James Bond when he walked into the thing and plugged the bad guy's laptop into the local network. I was just like, oh, this is done. This film's over for me, right? But it does happen. But the example I've got is that a company where I used to work, we had a customer who was breached with crypto miners, right? They were an e-commerce customer. They were breached with a bunch of crypto miners, and we discovered this in their environment. And we're like, you know, you're being farmed. They're using up resources. And like, well, what do you want to do? Well, you got to switch them off. They're like, but they're making us money. Those servers are making us money, and we're going to lose money if you switch them off. And of course, we had to work around that and understand it. So the business challenge impacted the cybersecurity answer. So it's really important to understand what it is, what it's for, etc. You can't secure what you can't see. Maybe I should say you can't secure what you can't understand. And the other one, which is still apparently contentious with some people, is assume breach, right? Assume you're going to get breached. In the US sense of the word breach, you know, in Europe, we sometimes talk about breaches and attacks, or, you know, successful attacks as the same thing. In the US, talk about breach. Okay, I've had some data, I've lost some data, someone's in and they've taken something. So assume breach, and that goes back to what I was saying before about having that plan that extends beyond the attack and beyond the successful attack. What are you going to do in those cases? But also in having a capability that enables you to know if you've been breached, if you missed it. So, for example, a lot of companies sell dark web scanning, and it sounds really cool, but you can't articulate the value of it. The value sometimes of dark web scanning, or, you know, bad guy website scanning, we could call it these days, because there's lots of not just the dark web, but paste sites and so on, is knowing if you've had a data loss. You know, think about, have I been pwned, right? But on a business and organizational industrial scale, did I lose some data? Has there been a loss of data? And can I come back and trace that and understand that, and then reinforce my security posture based on that, because I missed something for some reason? So, you know, assume breach, extend that out, use that principle to apply it to a plan. If I assume breach, what can I build into my plan that's not just about stopping the attack? Obvious one is use a framework, but don't use it exclusively. So go and look at NIST, go and look at the MITRE frameworks, go and look at Defend, right? Defend's a really cool, relatively new thing from MITRE, but don't look at it and go, wow, I must understand all of this. If you look at the Defend framework, for example, there are parts in there that are for law enforcement. They're not meant for businesses. There's parts in there about grabbing the email off the attacker's computer. Well, no, not many of us are going to be able to go and do that, right? That's for law enforcement. It's for forensic investigations that we can't carry out as a business. So use these frameworks to understand your gaps and your capabilities. But if you're in a medium or larger size enterprise, then build your own understanding of what they mean to you. I will always say that these frameworks are codified common sense for the most part. MITRE is a bit different, it's a lot of detail. But like most architecture and security frameworks, codified common sense, use them to learn some common sense. Right. Last couple, expertise. In cybersecurity, expertise is key. We've seen the cyber skills gap be a real problem in cybersecurity, and that's the reason why people are more likely to start outsourcing to MDR services, SOC as a service, what have you, because you can go and buy that expertise in, but you must keep a core strategic expertise in-house, and that's why outsourcing those key things, SOC, threat intel, threat research, is really strong. But make sure you understand that you need that expertise. Even if you're a small business, you need expertise around cybersecurity. You can't get by with just the patch guy. And not to leave it till last, not to belittle it, but learning, continual improvement of your plan is critical. Whether you use ITIL, in our SOC we use operational excellence as a guiding principle, which is actually a bit of an industrial continual improvement framework, but it works really well. Use a continual improvement framework to drive improvement and feedback loops and learnings within your plan. That's critical as well. Sorry if I went over, but that's my 5.
No worries. Thanks a lot, Dan. And Matt, let's come to you next. Your 5 key elements of a successful cybersecurity strategic plan.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. So, so my dad taught me this. He was in the military for 32 years, and his first and foremost when approaching anything is the 6 Ps. So number 1 is the 6 Ps. Now the 4th word is interchangeable. I'm going to use a polite one for this time, but poor planning and preparation leads to persistently, interchangeable, poor performance. So plan. What are you doing? What are your expectations? It's very much like my partner, she's a copywriter. She writes books and things like that. So when you're writing a book, you have a start, a middle, and an end. What's going to start? What does it look like in the middle? How do we end? How do we put a cap on this particular project and plan that we're doing? So always plan. What are you trying to achieve? Does your plan meet the expectations of the board, the investors, the C-suite? Do we have the necessary in-house skills? To touch on what Dan said, it's all about the skills in-house. If we don't have them in-house, let's bring them in from outside. If we bring them in from outside, how can we use that skill set to train our internal guys? All the while sharing knowledge. But as long as you set the foundation with planning, preparation, and you can avoid the other P's and aim for performance at the end, then that's a great start. And you do this by the second point, setting goals, smart goals, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time-based goals. What are the goals of this project? Focus in on those goals and make sure the project is steered down that line. Now, as long as the goals are, again, realistic, are they set to, maybe it's the current risk of a particular section of the business? What's the risk posture? What's the risk appetite? How are we going to mitigate that risk plan? So set the goals around reducing risk, securing your systems, and making everything measurable, achievable in a time-based manner. Because the moment any of these projects overrun, we all know, we've all been there, we've all seen it. It costs a lot of money to continually run these projects way past their dedicated deadline. Next one is coverage. So defense in depth. If we look at how security strategies are built, and then organizations tend to run with buzzwords. They're like, oh, we need a VPN. Yeah, that sounds great. Or, oh, we need a IDS, IPS. That's a new buzzword. Whatever it may be. We obviously, they're great to a certain extent, but looking at coverage, defense in depth. How am I going to cover all of my offices, my remote workers? Are we moving to the cloud? Do we have a cloud migration project? Are we in a hybrid cloud? Where are my workers? How do they access the data? Who accesses the data? How's the data being shared? Is it business to business, business to customer? What's my supply chain, to touch on some earlier points? Do we have legacy systems? I'm still going into places and seeing mainframes, which is fantastic to see them, but it's a question as to actually that they're coming back into form and fashion now, because they tend to be a bit more secure. But what are we trying to achieve, and do we have the right coverage model to achieve in those specific goal timeframes that we set earlier? The next one is control. So we've got the 6 P's: set smart goals, coverage, and then control. How do I control whatever the particular goal of that strategic plan is? What is the end game? Am I looking at controlling my endpoint devices? And again, touching base on the first question, workforces are now spread all over the place. Half of them are sat in Starbucks coffee shop, probably sat in the middle of a man-in-the-middle Wi-Fi set up. They're sipping their lattes and doing office work on potentially their home machine or whatever it may be. How do we secure that? How do we secure the data transiting from that device? Are they using the mobile devices? Vish touched on it earlier, the exploitable IoT kettle. There's lots of IoT devices. We've seen CCTV systems exploited, and people using them to get into networks. Do you still have a physical office? What we're trying to control, we're looking at user access, data access, cloud access, authentication, tunneling, segregation. I was speaking with an NHS customer the other day, and they were looking at their Wi-Fi network in some of their hospitals, and I was chatting to them about it. And they have one Wi-Fi setup, and both staff, patients, and people walking in and out of the hospital use the same Wi-Fi access point, no segregation, same password, and it's connected to all the systems. It's a questionable security practice. So what are we trying to control? Understand that, and that will help you set a targeted approach. And the sort of fifth and final is visibility. There's no point putting all these plans in together and touching base on some of the earlier points of multiple vendor products and all of this sort of disparate technology stack. Single pane, it's an Americanism, but single pane of glass. How do I get the data I need in front of me so I can see it from one screen or a couple of screens? Ultimately moving away from a sort of CapEx model to an OpEx model of having to know all these different technologies. What are they doing? How are they interacting? Can they interact? And we all know that, we're getting better at allowing vendor-to-vendor interaction, but still there's a gap. So bringing it into one central visible point with the necessary skill sets and people and process around to make sure that cybersecurity plan from start to finish is succinct, achievable, measurable, the board are happy, your investors are happy, and ultimately there's risk reduction while doing some sort of securing, whatever it may be. So that's my 5 key points to a plan.
Thanks very much. Let's move on to Eric next from Cisco. What are your 5 key elements for a successful cybersecurity strategic plan?
I think a lot that I'm going to say is being touched on already by some of the other participants. So I do not want to continue to repeat myself, but I think an important element, and I think predominantly for the smaller companies out there that have a little bit of lacking of IT staff. In general, IT staff is always very underoccupied. Always is always a lack of people. It's not that we usually have like spare people on the shelf. So I think a very important element is how are you able to automate some of the issues that you can anticipate on that might go wrong, even though you try to put obviously a lot of prevention in place. If something happens, can you automate certain tasks? And can you anticipate on what you want to do in case something goes wrong? There's a lot of tools nowadays, and I think if we can automate bits and pieces, it will make our lives for the IT people much easier. I think that's one thing. And another thing that we need to think of is how does all the devices that I am owning as a company connecting to the internet, whether this is a bring your own device, whether it is a corporate tablet or corporate PC, desktop even, how am I securing it? How do I make sure that end to end, whether people are working in an office, working in the Starbucks or on the side of the road as they're attending customer meetings or from home nowadays, how am I securing my machines? I think that is something to, it's key to think how you do this from A to Z. How are the devices connected to the internet? I think that is one of the main key elements, and obviously zero trust is a must nowadays to have in any shape or form.
Okay. Is that your full 5?
That's my full
Excellent.
3.
Excellent. 3. Okay. Right. And next we have Francis from Mimecast. What are your 5 key elements of a successful cybersecurity strategic plan?
So there is obviously going to be some overlap, but it's just to stress a few points here. It is a dynamic process. Nothing worse than taking a plan off the shelf and finding that you've moved on several software or service packs since you last did it. So first one is the risk identification. As I already said, what is the impact on the business? What audits have told us, identifying the key decision makers or the centers of gravity. Who are the people going to be making those decisions? Who are the people going to be leading any sort of incident or whatever you want to call it? So I think those bits really do need to be updated very regularly, especially with the great resignation we're seeing, or the quiet quitting where people are now not answering their phones at the weekends. So that risk identification becomes quite important, because having access to the people who are going to be dealing with the incidents themselves is actually a risk in its own right. So I think that risk identification, what is the problem we're trying to solve, and what are we trying to do, is that first one, that risk, and it has so many points. Then we'd go on to that mitigation planning. What are we going to do? So there should be playbooks, and we have any number of playbooks. And again, when I was in government, we would have playbooks for countries, incidents, themes. There were so many different playbooks you would have. And sometimes you get confounded by the noise. So going down to such a granular level can actually be a negative thing, because you end up just becoming SOP focused, and instead of allowing our people to think. And we practice something here called IBL, which is an old leadership tool, intent-based leadership. So we give the authority to our people who have the information. So we do empower our people quite a lot, but therefore there is that risk, again, that person not being there or so on. Overlapping then with what Matt and Dan had said, the defense in depth, making sure that each layer we put in place, we have to acknowledge they're going to get through some parts of our defense. But if we keep putting things in the way, segregating data, moving things around, having noisy neighbors, these sort of things, that defense in depth will then pay for itself in terms of the effort we put into it, because thinking of those, how I do it when I do a PowerPoint presentation, I have layers of the holy cheese, as it were, and you'll have lots of lines going through, but eventually, after you've put so many of these defenses in the way, very, very little will end up getting through to our interest in our valuable data. And that layer defense then looks at hardware, software, people, suppliers, and partners. So we look at that layer defense, and we make sure that our third parties actually have the same competence and policies in place as us. And if they don't, we then have zero trust. We treat them as a zero trust. So like one of the colleagues said earlier on the panel, we would treat them as an assumed breach, and therefore that's how we would deal with that particular partner, because not everyone's going to have the same competence as a cybersecurity company, but at the same time we do demand that they do X, Y, and Z if they want to work with us in a way. The third one then will be like the regular audits. Again, as I said, it's a dynamic process. I need to make sure the logging is still being done, in terms of the interesting data. Again, we do have so many data points that many companies have, and as again talked about earlier, there are so many different technologies people use now, and having those logs, you can just get confounded by the data. So again, making sure that these efficacy metrics, these are valuable, are they relevant? Making sure that when we are doing these audits, what's the point of it? Is it for the sake of an audit, or is it actually to then feed back into the system? So I said we monitor the third party competence and compliance. And then we do operate zero trust. We have to in this day and age, because people make mistakes. The attackers are getting very clever and also complex. My threat intelligence team that I run, they're all ex-law enforcement and government, because I train most of them. And what we do with them is that they're always looking for that insider threat, that particular new method that we haven't seen before, that novel method of attack. So the zero trust doesn't necessarily mean that we don't trust our people in terms of our partners. It's more that we have to assume that they may have been compromised because of a clever attack. And then fourth one we've put down was awareness training. And I said it before, we can keep people aware of what's going on, and we do it by different methods and media. We've all seen the training videos. We've all had to go to the monthly lecture where you just sit there, and we do a thing called Loo News. So in the toilets, we have little posters up where we put the different threats that we've had that week, interesting attacks, so you get from the various tips. So we have Loo News, we have videos, we have people come and talk. I can talk for England, as you can see, but actually it's sometimes nice having a different voice. And they'll go, oh gosh, this is really interesting. You think, wait a minute, I told you that 5 times, but having a different voice tell them, and suddenly the people get it. So that's quite frustrating, but it is just different ways of trying to do the awareness training without the people being resistant to it. Because people are going to click on links, they still do. And that's what I operated on in the days of psychological operations. So I make it so interesting for them, they'll click on the link, and that's human nature. And I think Terry Pratchett has it in one of his books. If you had a button that's going to end the world, hit it in a cave, the paint won't even dry before someone presses that button. It's just human nature to do certain things. So again, if we can just introduce different ways of the awareness training, just different methods, making it regular. So as a chemistry teacher of old for 11 years, the skill fade is unreal. When the children go off for their summer holidays and come back, they can barely hold a crayon again. You're just thinking, really, 6 weeks? So I've got to teach, and that's why we have that, as you all have experience in education, that cyclic curriculum where we just keep repeating back on it and build it up. Key stage 2, key stage 3, they cover the same thing just because it's that reinforcement. And again, we did a study at this UK cyber defence school, and we sent out a thing and it said, please don't click on this link. This is just a study. We just want to see where this email travels to. But the link is actually harmful, so don't click on it. And we actually got 116% return rate. And you think, wait a minute, how did you get 116? The people sent it to their friends, and you're like, wait, what? And so this piece of malware, speech marks that we told them about, told them not to click it, we got 116% positive hit rate. And that's people involved in cyber security for our country. So it happens. So people click on links, people do these things. So that regular. And then I really just need to stress the insider threat. Now, I refer here also to people who make innocent mistakes or have been victim of a targeted campaign, but we also do have malicious insiders. And one of the things coming up later would be that we are now seeing an increase in access brokerage, where instead of having Francis on your team who's going to break into your life and scare you and stand outside your kitchen window watching you most nights, we actually can just pay someone $1,000 and they'll give me access, or say, actually, we use so many VM machines in our area. Pick one, there's $1,000, and that saves me a couple of days of work when they've actually already given me access. Or a throwaway comment where they may say, well, I've finished my time at the company, but they never switch off my access, or they never switch off accesses because it takes months because there's so many people, we haven't got the resource. So these bits of information you're picking up. So that insider threat is there. And then the fifth point is the continuity planning, which we've already referred to. So, we've talked about the risk identification, the mitigation planning, the regular audits, the awareness, but actually, how does this fit into my wider continuity planning? So, the people, staff and customers, the processes, the technology and processes required, the premises and providers. So if you use the 4 Ps as we see in business continuity. So they're the things that I think should be in it. It overlaps because obviously when we talk to our colleagues here on the panel, you'll see that we actually have overlapped. We just use different terminology, but it's all the same thing. These are the key 5 things.
Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Well, thanks very much. Vishvas, now on to you. Let's do this and then we'll be on to our Q&A. So Vishvas, tell us about your 5 key elements for a successful cybersecurity strategic plan.
Well, some really good points have already been made, so I may not do the 5 just because I don't want to repeat, but I may just take a different approach on some of them. One of the ones which I don't think it's exec buy-in, right? And this is more for the security and IT folks, right? You need to have buy-in, and I know it's a hard conversation, and sometimes normally IT is a cost center, right? So normally people don't want to spend money if they're a margin business, but having that buy-in makes a huge difference. And to Francis's point, sometimes a different voice. Having your IT provider, having a cybersecurity professional who may come in, make that point, even though it's been the same point you've been making for 3 years, having someone external, with a couple of badges make that point sometimes gets the board to listen, right? And having buy-in is critical because they will influence, how quickly things get implemented, how far-reaching it is. So yeah, exec buy-in would be one of the kind of pillars, I would say. Second one, testing, right? And that's your DR plan, and I call it cyber simulation. But I love my quote, and I'll have to, everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face, right? And it's true, right? I've seen multiple instances where, oh, we've got a backup, okay, let's restore. Right? Or oh, we've got the CCTV, but the timestamp is wrong, right? When something physical has happened, it's test it. It's great having a plan, and I know it was raised before that organizations don't want to do it, but it is important. And it will allow you to learn where your gaps are and improve on them. Again, the more often you do it, it's like being back at school, as the point was just raised. If you keep on doing it, A, you'll remember it, and B, you'll find things to improve on, and it's that continuous improvement that you will implement, within your organization. So that, planning. Third, I would say culture, right? And I know it's a big word, but it's the relationship between IT and your security professional within the organization and your normal staff. Very often do I see that sometimes when I'm speaking to normal employees, when I do a social engineering, they don't want to talk to IT. So if your laptop is stolen, sometimes IT finds out after things are being happened to it. Whereas we all make mistakes, right? We're all human beings, but IT and security teams are not someone to be afraid of. They are there to help you, in most instances, and they're great people. I'll speak for myself, and having that culture where that communication lines are open between the end users and executives, and the people who are there defending it, because the defenders have to defend against 1,000 things, right? If you can be that support where if something happens, if you've clicked on an email and you realize, okay, there's something there, just let them know. He's like, listen, I have clicked on it, and maybe they can start doing something about it if it wasn't a phishing test, right? So it's developing that culture, and have you do that. I love the Lou lesson idea, and whether you do it through workshops or some, build that, spend a bit of time with your normal employees, and then probably the last one, frameworks, right? And I know it's been covered before. I think there's two frameworks, right? And how you want to approach. I know NIST, really good, love it. I think very risk-based. Personally, a big fan of the CIS, maturity-led. You can dictate where you want to be on that maturity scale, and it gives you a foundation to build on. And what it does to your board is it's something people can look at, and you can track it over time, because this is what happens. Investments are being made, then executives are asking questions, where did it go? Whereas if you've got a framework that you're following, and you can prove that the implementations you're making, go along a row in a spreadsheet, you can go back to the board and say, this was the money, this is where we put it, and this is the outcome. It allows you to build that relationship with the exec team as well, and the support, the ongoing support you will need to improve your cyber resilience. So yeah, not my 5, but just some of the ones. Yeah.
Good stuff. Brilliant. Thank you very much. Okay, we're on to Q&A time. Your chance to ask the panel any question about what we've been talking about today. Lindsay, do we have any questions?
Hi there, Martin. We have a question from Paul for Francis. Paul would like to know, what are your main cybersecurity concerns for 2023?
So we actually have covered a few of those, so that they're making sure your strategies are adaptive. Looking at that remote working model, making sure that the bring your own devices actually still meet the same compliance as the actual home base. Shadow IT legacy systems we've spoken about. So it's just making sure that the team are there. We're seeing more and more attacks in the home environment. I mean, again, it's where I would attack, because that's where the person is most vulnerable. So making sure that when the person is at home or away from the office, remote working, that they actually have got effectively the full defense that we would use in the office. I also am concerned about the increase in cyber domain. So if we don't behave properly as an industry, we will be made to behave properly as an industry by government, and governance isn't always good. Rushed legislation or insurance concerns don't necessarily then help the industry wider. So if we don't look after customers' data, as happened, then they brought in legislation, and as I say, legislation can be flawed, and it actually becomes more of a hindrance. But we're starting to see the same now in cyber insurance. So one of my concerns, we try not to attribute as a company, because I personally think it's a waste of time in terms of telling you who attacked you. So if I have my house, the analogy I use, if I have my house and someone burgles it, the police telling me who burgled it actually isn't very good news. I can't do anything with it. If they told me how the person burgled my house and why my house is such a target, that's more useful. So I find a lot of companies waste time attributing when actually they should spend their time on the mitigation and the continuity planning. And attribution has become a bit of a concern, because in my old role, I would get very annoyed at cybersecurity companies stamping all over my crime scene, because I'm trying to attribute. I'm a law enforcement. I'm trying to find it, and I've lost all my digital evidence because someone's gone stomping all over it and left a digital footprint of their own. So you're going to see changes, and where a nation state has been involved, some cyber insurance companies are now not going to cover it. Lloyd's did that release this week to say if a nation state attacks you, so attributing is actually going to harm you if you're attributing it's a nation state, but then actually they won't be covered by insurance. We talked about attacks by third party, access brokerage I've already spoken about. A different type of ransomware we're seeing is extortion, DDoS. So we saw it during the Olympics, and we're sort of seeing the build up for it for Qatar World Cup, where people are being told, if you don't pay us, we will actually then make sure X game or the penalty shootout will have a DDoS attack during your broadcast. So we're starting to see extortion, DDoS. Ransomware we've already spoken about, security stacking. Sophisticated spear phishing, we've seen a lot more work being put in by some threat actors to make sure that their attacks actually have an ROI, return on investment. No one ever thinks about the poor threat actors. They've got mortgages to pay, they've got their children's private school fees to pay, And so they want a return on their investment. So they're going to spend the time looking at their targets. So we should be able to obviously mitigate that. Increasing attempts to capture data in transit. I used to love doing data in transit captures because firstly you got out of the office, they gave you a nice big BMW X5 and then you had the big pineapple in the boot. And what you would do is sit there near the end of an airport, the plane would land, everyone switches their phones on, they connect to my pineapple in the back of the car, I collect the three-way handshake, drop lots of metadata onto their phones, they then taxi round to the terminal, get a bigger 3G, 5G thing, but I've already got their phone, I'm already sitting on their phone. So they're saying, oh, well, WhatsApp, Telegram and Signal are all encrypted. It doesn't matter, I'm sitting on your phone, I'm seeing what you're seeing. So they were good days. In the very, very early days, those of you who have been in the industry longer would remember the ambulances in Cheapside where we'd had the Pringles tin and you just capture all the passwords that were going across. Those were the good days. Those are good days. I mean, I'm happy now, but those were good days. And then the final one then is, as we said already, the malware as a service. We're just seeing it increasing. It's crime as a service because during lockdown, the poor criminals weren't allowed out because obviously they had to stay at home. What's happened is they just moved into the online space. So I sit as a magistrate down where I live, and we start seeing lots more of these sort of style attacks. So it is, the criminals adapt, and you say, well, this is new. You think it's actually not new. If you think about it, people used to do this in the post. The GPO used to have the section, Rosebery Avenue, where your post would be diverted. It's not new. It's just an evolution to meet the technology of the time. So they're my concerns for 2023. There's quite a few of them, but some of them are enduring, like the ransomware. We will continue to see this.
Yeah, let's throw that open to the rest of the panel then. Really interesting stuff there. In terms of what's on your mind for next year, what emerging threats, emerging trends people might need to keep an eye on? Anyone else want to throw in anything there or add to what Francis said there?
I would just add on the flip side, in a way, the further fragmentation and complexity of the cybersecurity market. And I know that's where I'm sat from. I'm like talking about myself, but as an ex-user, let's say, as an ex-customer of technology firms, and as a product person and a marketeer, is that a word? To understand how to articulate what people do and the value that you deliver and how everyone's talking about the same thing and in the same way, but they do everything it's a frustrating thing within the cybersecurity market, and it's being further fragmented with things like XDR and other things. The bandwagon jumping on that is happening. So that for me is a difficult thing for our customers to navigate as vendors, and it's on all of us, people on this panel especially, I would say, to work out how to make it a bit fairer. And I know I'm in marketing, I'm just like shooting myself in the foot, but maybe I'm a bit too principled. But that's the thing that's a risk to our customers, because they risk buying something that looks new and it's not new. It's just next gen seen by another name, or it's triage factory stock, or these things which they really have to understand. And they can look to the analysts, but if you're in mid-market and small business, a lot of the analyst firms aren't really focused on the companies that you're focused on, you're buying from. So it's on our customers and us to really understand how things work and the value it delivers to them, and to do their deep assessments. So my background in architecture, that was my job, to really deeply assess how someone's going to deliver what I need to me. So just, challenge us all, I guess I'll say, on what it is, because if they can't answer the hard questions, then whoever's selling to you, maybe you should look elsewhere.
Okay, right. Well, if we don't have any more questions,
Martin, sorry,
yeah.
just to cut in, we do have a couple more.
Oh.
I'm conscious there's just a couple of minutes left, so
Yep.
any questions that don't get answered, we will share the answers after the event. But we maybe have time for just one more. So we do have a question from Steve for Matt. Steve would like to know, knowing a client has a security vulnerability, but they have another team responsible for handling it, how do you get the business to listen to your recommendation rather than protect their position?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there's two ways to look at this. One is, if you're in the organization and you're trying to express the risk concern, the risk level of that vulnerability internally, you'll have a different voice than say a third party trying to present that risk internally. So that there's sort of two threads to that. But risk is the easiest way to quantify risk to the people who need to know and the people who will listen is based around the potential costs associated with a cleanup. And the only people who are going to listen to that are your C-level executives, the people who hold the purse strings, and they're the ones who will, as soon as you slap a monetary figure down, hey, this vulnerability in application X is going to potentially cost X, Y, and Z if we lose all of our customer data, and to back some of the things the other guys here have said on the panel, if there's compliance and regulatory requirements as well, we all have to adhere to GDPR, for example, and I spent 8 years in the data loss prevention field. And a sort of side story to that is some of the movie theaters, when they outsource all of the different components of the movie to small houses that produce content, the moment any part of that data is leaked, the movie theater would slap $1 million fine on each one of these smaller companies. They have to pay up, and then they have to prove that they themselves did not leak that data, and then they'd get the money back. But it's quantifying that level of risk, but from a financial perspective, it's always going to come less bitter from somebody internal versus somebody external.
Okay. Right. Well, yeah. So as Lindsay said, we'll address the other questions separately. And we've just got enough time to thank the panel and to thank you for attending. We do have, this should be on your screen now, some great offers exclusively for attendees of this event. So if you want to take advantage of those, well worth taking a look at, then what you need to do, I know we've been saying don't click links, but this link is well worth clicking. It's a legit link, I promise. Click through for Probrand's revised cybersecurity capability assessment. If you click through to the feedback form, you will be asked a question there around which of those offers you would like to take advantage of, and then you'll get details of those through to you in due course. So, well, thanks a lot to the panel. Thanks for taking part, and thank you for joining us today. Goodbye.